Hey, everybody, welcome to the Book Leads Impactful Books for Life and Leadership. I'm your series host and leadership performance coach, John Jaramillo. This podcast series is about getting to the books that have impacted the lives of the people in my network. So all these guests are great leads that I'll be interviewing on those books, having that conversation. I want to get to those books that have impacted or influenced the way that they do business, they do their work, they carry out their lives, whatever it may be. All those lives and areas of your journey intersect. And in this series, I cover three categories of books. The first, where they're sharing with me a book I haven't read. The second, where we're covering a book we've both read, whether specifically for the series or from our past lives. And then the third category is when I get an author and or publisher on here to share the message of the book that they're trying to get out to the masses. Today, my guest is Massimo Backus, and Massimo has dedicated his career to empowering leaders with a powerful reminder: you are enough. His journey began amidst personal battles with perfectionism and a harsh inner critic fueled by the challenges of dyslexia. These struggles ultimately guided him towards finding and teaching self-compassion. As an executive coach, speaker, and facilitator, Massimo has revolutionized the leadership styles of thousands across prestigious companies like Amazon, Nintendo, Fox Entertainment, and Sony. His coaching approach is straightforward and impactful, tailored for open-minded and committed senior leaders who are serious about change. And I was lucky enough to meet Massimo through Sabina Sulat, who I had a conversation with on this series in episode 72, where we covered her book, Agile Unemployment, Your Guide to Thriving While Out of Work. She suggested Massimo and I connect just based on the nature of his work, his approach to leadership, and especially because he has a book coming out this fall. So here we are. We got to talking, we connected, talked about each other's work, and it just makes sense that we're here for this conversation. So Massimo, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, John. Pleasure.
Absolutely. So obviously read the bio, gives a high level glimpse into the work you do, but who are you today, Massimo? I always like to get a good, just a good gauge on what someone's up to, the kind of work that goes into what's shared in their bio. What does that look like in the day to day?
Yeah, I think you can talk about titles and the work that you've done and who you work with, and there's some interest to that, but ultimately that's pretty boring because that's not the why we do the work. Why I do this work is because there's one commonality across all leaders, and that's that they're human. And so my work is fundamentally about humans being leaders, and there is decades of work that has been about helping leaders be more human, as opposed to recognizing that they're human first. And that's where we start. And when we can get the human part right, leadership becomes a lot more interesting, impactful, and more fluid than kind of the friction that we've all experienced in our lives, whether we're being the leader or we're the one being, or the follower being led. That all comes down to something that's happening in the human condition.
So the work that you do, is it mostly one-on-one? Does it include workshops, group coaching?
All the above. I do a lot of one-on-one executive coaching. I run large-scale leadership development programs, and then I also have group coaching programs that I do with the executive teams. And again, the core of that, it's really agnostic of even what industry or what level someone's at. These are all people. And especially for those that are in leadership positions, sometimes those that work with them forget that they're human and they get treated differently and they're held to different expectations and different standards. They are unaware of the power dynamic with which they hold, given their position of authority. And so we got to get down to, what are the basics and what's getting in their way from their human experience, so that they can be the leader that they want to be. And we'll probably talk about this later, John, but there's a big gap between intention and impact in organizations. I have no doubt that most people have the best intentions. There's no question there. And yet when we look at the research, there's some pretty toxic impacts that are happening across the board. So what's happening in that gap? It's not because people don't want to be better, want to be kinder, want to be more supportive, more empathetic, more empowering. It's not a challenge of want. It's a challenge of what's the internal unmet need that someone has that's getting in their way of being able to have the impact that they want.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when Sabina reached out about introducing us and possibly you coming on the podcast, um, obviously you go to the person's profile, you get a sense for what they're doing. I saw that your book was coming out. I love the title. That stood out. I got to know a little bit more about your work. Um, and before I jump to the next question, I'm curious, just because obviously just in the first few moments that we've had together, you're sharing a lot about the human aspect of leadership and where that falls and how that's the foundation of what leadership can and should be. Um, what did you see, and I know we're past the pandemic, knock on wood, but how did you see your work evolve? How did you see questions from your clients evolve? What did you see? What did you take stock of during the pandemic? Because it just seems like, although obviously our humanity is always there, it kicked up during COVID. There was more urgency in the world. People were more in need of mental health services. We all had our own challenges to whatever in varying levels. What did you see in your work? Did people hover towards or gravitate towards your work because of that human focus? What did you see in those last couple of years?
I think in times of uncertainty and scarcity, more than times of abundance or where things are going well, people are looking for answers. They want to make sense of what's happening around them. They want to make sense of how they're feeling, how they manage stress or burnout or malaise, apathy, ennui, the resistance to the change in what's going on, the anxiety that comes with the uncertainty. And the years of the pandemic were constant uncertainty, whether it was about job security or your health or what was happening in your home or then just the pandemic itself, like what's happening with this COVID thing that keeps evolving and changing, and what's the next wave. I mean, it was constant.
Yeah.
And we all shared in that experience. Some people had homes that were big enough where they could have an office that was separate. Some people worked from their kitchen island. Our experiences were different in the regards of what was our environment, but we were all experiencing this general stress of the uncertainty, and people were looking for answers. They were looking for a relief of some sort. And I think there's the easy reliefs. There's things that we can go shop, and there's kind of the retail relief. There might be having drinks after work relief. I think people have a longing for connection. And when it was challenging to connect with people in person and you spent all time in these little boxes on Zoom, the last thing you wanted to do at the end of the day was get on another Zoom call to connect with your friends outside of work. So they were looking for, how do we connect with one another in ways that are going to nourish that human need that we have for connection and for belonging. So those are some of the themes of things that I saw. Yeah. What did you see, John?
I just saw people being more forthcoming. I think, everybody they understand the theme of quiet quitting that played out throughout the pandemic, right? So I think people really did evaluate, most people did evaluate what they were doing for work, how much flexibility they had with work. They had family commitments. I know I had to keep my kids home from daycare for months. Luckily, my wife and I have flexibility in our jobs where we made it work. But I think there was, like you said, so much uncertainty, so much fear. I think people were being more honest with each other. That's a main reason that I started this series, was during the pandemic in virtual forums, people were just more open. They were more open that they were struggling. They were more human, that humanity came through. So they were just more honest. That's one of the things that I hope sticks around after we're well clear of the pandemic, is just that humanity, that loss that we had for our society, our community, what we went without in those years. And I hope we don't take that for granted as much as we used to before. So I think there was just a lot of honesty, and that's what made me love storytelling even more, was just how much people were sharing, that they had a story in and of themselves that they could share with people, even if it was about their struggles. There was something about the honesty that people had where it helped that connection. It wasn't just that everyday facade of this is what's going on at work, this is what's going on with family. Like, oh, no, this is what I need right now. This is what I'm going through. So I just saw a lot of honesty, and I did see with clients a lot of people realizing they had more value to offer. There was more that they wanted to do. So it set people off in different journeys. I think a lot of people did learn lessons. Others learned them. They may forget them, but it was an opportunity for growth. There was a lot of loss, but there were silver linings that we could take advantage of. Just giving that permission to each other to be open about what we're going through. I appreciate that because I went through my own struggles, and I found it. I'm keeping to that and just being honest of where I stand. Before we started, you asked me how long I've been doing this. You asked me, is there anything? So you're like a pro, or you feel completely comfortable? And I told you no. Every time I go to hit record, I still get those jitters. I still get those nerves, and that's me dealing with my anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a part of me. I live with it. That's what keeps me. And you said that's what kind of keeps you attuned to what's going on. That's what makes you better. Is just like you always have that bit of nervousness, that bit of anxiety. So that all comes from the realization I had during the pandemic, where it's just important. Listen, if you think it's a weakness, speaking it out, just being honest about it, puts it to the side. It may not work for everybody. It does for me. I told you right out. I said, no, I still get nervous when I hit record, but then my guest and I fall into this cadence and we have a great conversation, and it's what it is. Years ago, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, I've nailed it. I feel completely comfortable. So it shifted in me. So I think I've seen that shift in a lot of people where they just handle life differently.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're saying about that honesty with each other is something that came out of the pandemic. And I share in the hope that we hold on to these things because there are silver linings that come from hardships in life. There are lessons that come from hardships in life. And there are things that we've taken from COVID that I do hope we hold on to, which is not hiding behind the mask that everything is perfect all the time, and recognizing that we all have good days and bad days. We all deal with stress, and that even framing things as whether it's a strength or a weakness puts a judgment on our experience. And I found that judgment gets in the way of curiosity. And in order for me, and in the work that I do with my clients, but let's just start with me, because I don't believe that I'm in a position to help people unless I'm committed to being my best self every day. Then who am I to be in a position to support others? And I've had to work really hard to be honest with myself. And one of the many barriers to being able to do that was to recognize all of the harsh judgments that I had of myself, and shamefully, the harsh judgments that I had of other people and expectations. And being honest with yourself allows you to say things like, yeah, I get anxious before I do these. But there's also honesty, John. I would imagine it's because you care, because you want this to be good, because you want to create a welcoming environment for your guests, because you want this to be a valuable conversation for your listeners, because it comes from the heart, because it matters to you. And so, yeah, we can get butterflies when we care about something. But, to even think that there's anything quote unquote bad about that, or to judge that as a negative, I'm like, oh, to me, that's a beautiful thing. To feel anxious about something we care about means we're alive.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's funny because there have been instances where certain emotions, they're on display on TV, whatever. One that came out was like Ronaldo in the Euro Championship, right? The guy can be dramatic. He got flack for walking off the field during the World Cup when when Portugal was out of the World Cup. And you still hear, why is he crying? Man up, this and that. And I respect the crying, not because, and you can't do it all the time in certain situations, but I don't look at it as he needs to man up. I see it. It's not a matter of my thinking, oh, man or not even in the conversation, but it's what you just said. when you share a certain emotion, when you share certain words, like it proves to me that you're in this, that this was important to you, whatever it may be. So I love how you bring that up, where it's like it just shows your flair, your passion for what you're doing. So anytime I see certain passions, whether sometimes it can be anger, not violence, but anger, it can be frustration. With my kids, yeah, it can be crying. There's certain things where it's like, okay, that shows like you're in this, you have a fire for this, you want to do this. That I've grown a deep appreciation for, because it is this marker that stands out that something is important to somebody. And we don't really see that too often. It's not to say that anyone that doesn't cry or doesn't get frustrated or doesn't get angry or is overly composed doesn't care. But anytime there is a bit of just that honesty in whatever form, whether it's emotion, facial, your vocal, whatever you want to share, I like that. I like passion, because I just think too often we're just going through the motions and the script of life, that when we do get emotional for whatever reason, it's like, okay, that fire is still there. You still want it.
Yeah, I think the difference is when we're conscious versus unconscious of an emotion. So, like, let's take anger, for example. Anger is an emotion that has a connotation to it. Most people probably say, like, I don't get angry, or it's not something that they would take a lot of pride in. Maybe if somebody does take a lot of pride in their anger, I don't know what that says about them, but probably more of an outlier. The reality is, it is just an emotion.
Yeah.
It is not a trait. It is not a quality. It is not part of your identity. It is just an emotion. And when we're actually aware and conscious of the emotion of anger, again, in this example, then we can choose to do something with that. We can get curious about it. Why am I angry? What am I angry about? Is it about
Yeah.
an injustice? Is it
Right.
about I'm feeling hurt? Oh, maybe it's actually sadness. Maybe I'm not feeling
Mm,
appreciated in this moment.
yeah.
But if we are unconscious of it, or we're judging ourselves for being angry, oh, I got angry again. I'm a bad person for that. Or I yelled at my kids. I'm a bad parent.
Mm,
Not that I'm suggesting people yell at their kids, but um, let's be honest, it happens.
yeah. Oh yeah.
And when it happens, it often comes from a place of because I care
Yeah.
or because I'm frustrated. There's some underlying emotion. If we can get curious about what that is, not beat ourselves up for it, we typically can catch ourselves pretty quickly and choose a different approach. And
Yeah.
that might be I got to go for a walk or get some fresh air, or it might be sitting down with your kid and saying, I didn't mean to raise my voice.
Yeah. Oh
Here's what I'm
yeah.
trying to convey, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I chuckle only because you talk about kids and when they're mad and this and that, but I've told my 5-year-old he's at that tantrum phase,
Uh-huh.
which is incredible because my 8-year-old never had that at all. At all. Like I can count the number of tantrums my 8-year-old had maybe 4 times, but my 5-year-old, he just flies off the handle. But I tell him, because I want to kind of put it in his head exactly what you said. It's like, can you express it? Can you explain it? So I tell him, listen, and I'm telling the truth. Maybe I'm planting a bomb by telling a kid, it's okay to be angry, but you have to be considerate. You have to be, or in kid language, you have to be careful how you show it. It's okay. You can be angry at me. Absolutely. I tell my kids all the time, listen, you can be mad at me. That's fine. But we got to be careful how we talk to each other. Just tell me what I did wrong. And some people may see that as coddling, but I think that's starting them at a young age of just kind of leveling out their emotions, expressing themselves. I want that to get into their heads that all those emotions are okay, but it's how you express it and how you impact other people that matters most. Because I don't think that they should be suppressing that. I don't think they should be shutting themselves down. I don't think they should be internalizing and canning it up, because that would be the ultimate nuclear bomb, because it'll catch up with them at some point. But it is important, like you said, whether it's adults or kids, just to be cognizant of it and see what they can do about it. But so the kid examples are just, I'm living through it right now, so those are just fresh in my mind.
Yeah. And telling somebody it's not okay to be angry would be the same as saying it's not okay to be happy, or it's not okay to be sad, or it's not okay to be joyful.
Yeah.
they are all equal. They are all equal emotions, right?
Yeah. They
But the
all
point
serve a purpose.
they all serve a purpose. But the point you're making is it comes back to the responsibility we have with what we do with that and how it impacts other people. And yeah, that's really important. But you first have to be aware of it and accept it, that it's all just a part of, the moment we came into this world, we signed up for an experience. And in that experience, we're going to feel happiness and we're going to feel anger and all the other emotions in between. And they do not have to dictate the experience, but it's just a part of it. Like breathing and the need to drink water, like these are all things that are just a part of being the organisms that we are,
Yeah.
Um,
That's true, because my thing is I don't want him to lose that anger, because to me that's just energy that's been captured, hijacked in a certain way. But to me that's high energy. That's pure gold for me. That's really the way I see it. It shows me how passionate, how much energy he has for something. Now it's a matter of, yes, taming the beast, but capturing it and harnessing it in a certain way. So there's so much value in everything you're saying, because all those the emotions, they all serve a purpose, no matter what they look like.
Yeah, I like that, capturing and harnessing it. Yeah, it kind of goes back to the why. Like, what's the direction that you want to
Exactly.
point this energy? How do you want to hone the laser?
Massimo, to understand how you got to what you're doing now, the way you're thinking, even in this conversation that we're having right now, what did your path into your career look like? I usually like to start around when someone goes into college or the workforce. What did it look like from then to now, just to kind of understand where you're coming from in terms of what you're sharing with us today and the book that's coming out?
Yeah, I did not follow a typical path. And sophomore year of college, halfway through, I dropped out. And best decision I had ever made in my life up to that point. And it really came down to, I didn't know why I was there. I didn't have the right reason to be there. I wasn't taking advantage of it. And it felt like I was occupying a space in the classroom that was deserving of somebody else and not me. And the first job I got as a college dropout, not that there were a ton of them for me, was doing door-to-door sales. And I spent a year every day knocking on a minimum of 100 doors and getting rejection, rejection, rejection. But it was also the first time in my life that I was outside of the educational institution. And as someone who's dyslexic, every year that I had spent up to that point in the educational institution was not a good fit for me. So it ruptured my self-confidence, my self-esteem, and didn't give me very many outlets to figure out what are my strengths, what are my natural talents. I had a lot of that energy you're talking about with your son. It was even anger when I was younger, but I didn't know where to place it. I didn't know what to do with it. And doing this work in sales, it wasn't about the selling that I loved so much, although that was fun, but it was about the relationship building. And it was about building sales teams and about building the confidence and motivating those sales teams and helping people find their own unique way of telling their story and the way that they wanted to work with customers. And it felt like a drug to me, a very healthy drug, thank goodness. But it lit me up inside for the first time to see the impact of something that I could do to benefit other people and see how that made their experience better. And I didn't know what to do with that at the time. The closest reference I had was Tony Robbins. He kind of does this stuff, but I didn't want to be Tony Robbins, but that was all I knew. I knew nothing about it. Anyways, fast forward, I went back to school and studied psychology. I got a master's in organizational psychology and started working in leadership development, coaching, and then moved into executive coaching. And at this point, it's been 20 years. The drive, that experience that I had as a college dropout doing door-to-door sales is what has propelled me forward. It was a longing, it was a curiosity to find a place for my unique strengths and gifts and talents and how I could spend my career putting those to good work. That was very important to me. I couldn't just have a a job or just get a paycheck. I had to find something where I could use this every day and get better. Throughout that process, life happens. And that was a forcing function for me to learn and grow myself. And so what started as a calling has become a life's work through the clients that I've supported over the years, but so much of it is also the work that I've had to do and continue to do daily for myself. And recognizing that there was trauma that had happened in the past. And I'm not referring to capital T trauma, people that have been, physically abused or verbally abused. But growing up in the educational system and not knowing how to find my place, and essentially spending 18 years of my life thinking that I was, dumb or stupid or broken, that scars somebody. And I had to do some work to unpack that and not let that get in my way of my ability to lead the people that I'm responsible for, support the people that I work with. And that's been a lot of work that I've had to do in parallel to the work that I do with my clients.
So going back to college, when you had mentioned to the effect that, you didn't want to take a seat up for somebody you felt deserved it more than you. So where did that awareness come from? I mean, I can imagine you just shared all the years that you'd gone through just thinking that something was wrong with you. But what did that look like up until that point in those couple days or those couple months where you were really thinking about leaving? What was that conversation like with yourself?
It's a great question, John.
Just because the way that you put it was like, wow, that's a lot of self-awareness for somebody that age, second year of college, to say, you know what, like I'm taking from someone else, or this is somebody else's spot, or whatever the case may be. So I'm just curious, maybe in speaking to other guests about trauma, little t, big T, disruptions to childhood, whatever it may be, there's always that common theme that because they went through those things, they're just more tuned to their environments. Whatever it may be that happened to them, they're just more aware. They get to the point where they want to be for other people what they wish they had. They're more cognizant and aware of other people, and because they felt left out, used, whatever the case may be, they're just more tuned to the environment. So does that play into it? Was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can say there's been 3 instances in my life where I've had an intuition, a calling for something that in a spiritual sense did not come from within me. And dropping out of school was the first, asking my wife to marry me was the second, and writing the book that I wrote was the third. Meaning that these are not premeditated things. These weren't goals. This isn't something I put on a vision board. Mm-hmm. It was a unconscious thought that became conscious and repetitious, and at some point you can't ignore it. And recognizing that I had gone through high school and I had gotten into college. I had done all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, that all of my my peers had done, and it still wasn't working. That at some point I had to surrender to the fact that this path is not my path. And that is terrifying at any age, but it's terrifying as a kid when there's a pretty well, marked path for people. That is, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married. That's the path. That's the path that my community of people, my peers that I was around, did. And to realize that's not my path is a very scary thing. And so it took something bigger than my own self-awareness. It took, I think, this moment of insight, which is, I don't know what's on the other side of this, but I know that if I stay here, it's not going to get any better. And the trust and support of my family and community and people around me to help me navigate that was really important, and I was fortunate to have that. But I think that when we trust ourselves, we are open to those signs. And people listening now are probably getting some signal, and it might be to get out of a relationship or change careers or something that feels like you're stuck. There's been friction. It's not, the outlook does not look good. If you grab the magic 8 ball, it says outlook does not look good, and you realize that maybe I need to change something. And that's terrifying because we don't always know what's on the other side of change. Yeah. So you have to have faith that this intuition that there is something better on the other side. I don't know what I would be doing today if I had stayed there. I don't know if I would have found the work that I have found without dropping out of college and doing door-to-door sales, right? I mean, who would have thought?
It's just incredible how most of the times when I hear similar stories of trauma and where someone is today, it's incredible. It's like miraculous that people are doing the work that they feel in their soul now because they took a different path then because of the traumas of all levels and varieties that might have occurred or might have hit them when they were younger. It's just remarkable because it's like, do you change all those years where you might have felt more comfortable? I mean, every path, that ripple effect from the start to where you are now is going to look different based on circumstances. But it's just incredible how I've seen that where it's just people are doing that work that's in their soul, but it started from an uncomfortable place.
Yeah. And in full honesty, if you said, hey, you want to go back and relive those years as a student in middle school and high school? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And yet I am grateful for the life that I've had.
Yeah.
So both of these things can be true. That was awful. I don't want to go back and relive that. But I'm grateful for what it taught me. I'm grateful for the resilience that was built out of it. And what is available to me today because of those lived experiences. And
I think you just answered the question I was going to ask is, does it make sense from your childhood that you're here, that this is what you're doing?
Yeah. And I think people can come to these things in all sorts of ways, John. I mean, this, as I described it, like that was like the first kind of dose of a drug that I got. My work is also my hobby. It's also my passion. It's what I read about in my free time. Like, it is, it's more than just a job. It's something that I love and that is incredibly fulfilling for me. It's many of my friends are in this space. It's my community. And that's all intentional. That's by design. And that's not something that everyone needs. But for me, for whatever reason, and I think that's probably more biology than anything else, it's become at times it has been an obsession that I can't settle for anything unless I'm doing something aligned to my calling and purpose. And that's a burden as well. Because you got to find it. And there were many years where I didn't know what I was looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about what you're looking for and finding it and if it's right for you. And because, I'm in the leadership space. I'm having a blast, enjoying it and doing this podcast as well. But I feel like there's an itch that's just, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. But the great thing is, like, I've learned to appreciate the journey to get there. Like, I don't need that goal in hand, that success all beautifully wrapped up perfectly, a little neat gift. So I'm having fun exploring. So I appreciate you sharing.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
As a coach, John, sometimes I can't turn it off.
Yeah, no, I know.
Forgive me. You said there's an itch. Something that you're still looking for, but you don't know what it is. If you could describe it, is it an itch of something that is unresolved within you, or is it an itch of something that is unresolved out in the world?
Oh, God. I think it's kind of just that place where both worlds collide, where it just feels, it feels right now, but it feels like there's something missing, like a perfect combination and harmony between internal and external. So I'm still doing work on that, trying to figure out how much of it is personal, how much of it is professional, just to get to that, work towards, not achieve, because it's almost like almost impossible. But this kind of just harmony where everything kind of, um, yeah, I don't even want to use the wrong wording just because I don't want to disrespect anything that I have now, but just something is calling me. Um, so I don't know. I mean, just in the process, that work in progress of just working in that direction.
Yeah, but you feel like there's something more. There's something else in addition that you uh,
Yeah.
with its presence, you'd be in flow. There'd be that harmony,
Yes.
coherence. Yeah,
So hey, knock on wood, if my life ended today, I'd be completely happy. But there's just something um, that I'm working towards, and like I said, I enjoy the process, so it's not stressful. But there's something that is calling to me. I just have to figure out what it is. Um, Massimo, what does leadership mean to you? I'd be especially remiss if I didn't ask you as an executive coach. How do you define leadership? What does great leadership look like to you?
when I think about leadership, um, it's probably a bit different than how others would look at it. Um, it's been defined by so many great minds and authors and thought leaders over the years that uh, I it seems irrelevant to me to try and come up with a new definition, but rather look at it from a different perspective.
Mhm.
And I believe that self love is a leadership epiphany. So define leadership however it is that you want.
Mhm.
But there is a missing epiphany with your ability to be the most effective, impactful, uh, inspiring. Again, however, whatever leadership means to the person that's
Yeah.
listening,
Yeah.
whatever that is, that's okay. And whatever it is going to be inhibited, limited without this epiphany of self love. Now, this is something that there's a tremendous amount of research on. And this is something that I speak to from my own personal experience. I had this epiphany. And the reality is, on the other side of the epiphany is a choice, because self love is a choice. And part of that is getting over how gross it is, even is to say self love out loud, especially in a leadership context, because it seems antithetical. His leaders are about
Yeah.
serving others. And if I'm about serving others, there's no room to love myself. That would just get in the way. And I think that that is one of the biggest misconceptions in leadership today. The choice is a daily practice of self compassion so that we can be in service of others, so that we can do all of the things that our intentions say that we want. And I believe all leaders have the best intentions for their people. I also believe that all leaders are flawed and they do not execute on those intentions flawlessly because they're human, me included. So the choice really comes down to, am I willing to practice self compassion? Am I willing to make a commitment to love myself in service of my leadership?
Massimo, when it comes to self-compassion, I read it in your bio, you just shared about it. So can you speak to the connection between the work that you're doing and your own experience? Is it because you saw that self-compassion, obviously the educational world, it was a different time, but you'd like to say they should have taken care of you, shown you that there was nothing wrong with you, right? Kids these days are getting that. It's kind of a consequence of when we grew up. That aside though, that focus on self-compassion, that focus on the human, Can you speak to that as it pertains or connects to your own experience? Is that what
Yeah,
drives that? I mean, what was it in your bio? You said you are enough. Can you speak to that for me a little bit, just based on, I see a connection, but I want you to say it is. What is that? Like, you are enough. Where does that come from? And yeah, is it driven by your own experience?
100%. So a moment ago, I said that there were these three moments of insight in my life, and that one of them was writing this book. Well, that came from my own epiphany around self-love. And to your point, John, about my experience in the educational system, I don't harbor any resentment because I have a practice of self-compassion. I have a practice of forgiveness, and I regularly forgive others, and so there's no resentment. In fact, it's just gratitude and love from my perspective. I spent a good chunk of my career in talent development, leadership development, and coaching, and was very talented as a practitioner, as a facilitator, as a speaker, as a coach, helping other people be better leaders and managers. Now, the hypocrisy in this is that I was also a leader and a manager myself, and not a very good one. So I was being quite a hypocrite. And I asked the leaders that went through all of my programs to participate in a 360 assessment to get feedback. Eating my own dog food, I did the same thing. And the feedback that I got from my team is that I was objectively a bad manager, that I did not create trust, I didn't create psychological safety, I didn't set clear expectations, I didn't hold them accountable. All the things that I was espousing to others that they should do and helping them do effectively, I was not able to do for myself. And I had the best intentions. I certainly wanted to do those things, but I was not capable of doing them well. That put me in a very difficult situation. You think about imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud. In really objective terms, you think about job security. Oh my gosh, if I'm not doing this for my team, and I'm responsible for modeling this within the organization, then what does that say about me? Do I have a place here in this business? And I spent a good 6 months trying to figure out how to fix this on my own. And in particular, the feedback that I really needed to fix, the biggest thing, was that I was really defensive. My team had questions for me, or if they provided feedback to me or challenged an approach or a process, a work product, that I would get defensive. And I heard those words and I tried to understand them, but it didn't make sense to me because my intention wasn't to be defensive. And I was so caught up in my intention that I could not see the impact that I was having. And it took me actually leaving to go to a retreat. I went to a week-long retreat. It's called the Hoffman process. That is where I had this leadership epiphany. It was on the fourth day. It's a very out-of-the-box retreat. Somebody who had spent their career facilitating retreats. Everything that we did here was something new to me, and it blew my mind, and it shifted me to my core. And on that fourth day, I was on a break and I went for a walk by myself in the woods, and I could remember feeling the sun hit my skin, and I could remember hearing the leaves rustling with the breeze going through the trees, as if all of my senses were heightened, like Spider-Man or something. And I remember recognizing that there was nothing happening in my mind, that my mind was quiet, it was silent, and realizing that what was absent was a voice of perfectionism, criticism, judgment, and self-protection. And that voice is what was creating all of the behavior that I wanted to change. That self-view that I wasn't enough unless I was right, and so I had to defend myself. It was also in that moment that I first learned what it is like to actually love yourself. And I want to be clear, self-love is not, I'm better than other people.
Yeah.
Self-love is not, I don't need to improve. I'm perfect just as I am. Self-love is not pity. It is acceptance of who I am in this moment. And who I am in any given moment is someone who has hopes and dreams, strengths and great qualities, weaknesses, limitations, shadow side, self-doubt, someone who is, a dreamer and also scared to dream. I'm all of those things. And self-love is an acceptance of all of those things. And when you accept it, then you're in a place to be truly responsible and curious. Okay, you want to dream big, and you also doubt that you can do it, and you fear that that's possible. You want to change your behavior, but you're beholden to this other behavior because it is self-protective. Are you willing to let go of being defensive, which has been a coping mechanism for so long, so that you can actually be in service of your team? Who are you without defensiveness? Who are you without fighting the good fight to prove that you're the smartest person in the room?
Yeah.
These are the types of questions I had to ask myself. And from that day, it has been a daily practice of self-compassion that has kept me as close to that moment in the woods as possible. And there are days, weeks, months that go by and it slips away, but I always remember that it is possible. And that is the guiding light. To go back to our conversation earlier about anger, if I express anger, which happens, I'm human, I get angry. I can acknowledge that that's an emotion that I'm having, and that if I'm compassionate with myself, I can understand that that's probably because I don't feel safe, seen, heard, appreciated, or loved. And I can offer those things to myself. It's great when I get it from other people. It's great to be validated by others, sure. But if I can offer myself what it is that I'm seeking, then I can manage that anger a lot more effectively than anger turning to frustration, turning to resentment because other people aren't showing me the love that I want from them.
Yeah. No, thank you for that background. That provides a lot of great context for who you are, how you got to this point, and specifically how you got to this book. So we can jump into the book now, Massimo, if you want. If you can, just why don't you introduce your book and just tell us a little of the backstory of what led up to actually pulling the trigger to write the book.
So the title is Human First, Leader Second, How Self-Compassion Outperforms Self-Criticism. And the impetus for the book was that moment in the woods. I didn't know it at the time. I never aspired to write a book. I never had aspirations to be an author. Being dyslexic, I wasn't really into books very much until I was in my 20s and actually, found the things that I wanted to learn. But mid-pandemic, 2021, I had a regular practice of self-compassion at that point in time, and where appropriate was introducing it to my clients. I wasn't forcing it. I didn't have an agenda that said, hey, you need to be self-compassionate, but I've worked with over 3,000 leaders at this point, and they all come from different backgrounds. They're all unique individuals. And yet I can say with confidence that beyond them being human as a commonality, they all suffer from some version of I'm not enough. I'm not enough unless I'm the best, the smartest, the richest, the most powerful, the biggest team, the biggest title. Until I get the next promotion, I'm not enough. Whatever it might be. Always seeking for something outside of themselves in order to feel like they're enough. And I was a data set of one, John, which was self-compassion changed everything for me. It changed my personal relationship with myself. It's changed my relationship with my family, with my wife, my son. I saw the benefits as abundant. And I also realized that I wasn't seeing this as a conversation within the context of management, leadership development, or even in coaching. No one was talking about self-compassion. People were talking a lot about compassion, which again goes back to that notion that I'm a servant leader and I need to be compassionate towards others. I fully agree with that, except there's one thing that's missing. You also need to be compassionate to yourself. And it was because I saw that as absent that I was called to write the book. And I was completely naive when I started doing it. I'm sure for some people, writing a book might be an easy thing to do. It was not easy for me. And I had to battle a lot of imposter syndrome and doubt, who am I to write this book? What is it that I really have to say? Does this really matter? And I kept coming back to this leadership epiphany, that if you discover something that is so remarkably transformative, and then you start to see it transform the lives of others, meaning the clients that I've worked with, and not share that with an audience that you know objectively will benefit from it, then what am I doing?
Yeah.
Is how I felt. And to that itch that you were talking about, that thing that you're like, there's something that, is missing for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was something missing for me too. Because I was looking for something that was bigger than myself. I was looking for something that I could stand behind and beside for the rest of my life with conviction, in a professional sense. I do that, with my family, but in a professional sense. And knowing that it is not intended as this isn't a panacea. It's not a cure-all. It's not a quick fix. It is something that requires daily practice. And, the commitment that I have made to myself around self-love means that I'm making a commitment for the rest of my life. Every single day, I am confronted with the challenge, the resistance, the barriers, the friction to be loving to myself. Every day I'm confronted with reasons why I shouldn't do that, or I'm unlovable, or I'm not enough, or I'm not worthy. I would imagine that sounds familiar, that other people feel that way too. Every day I make a commitment that I'm not going to let that be my lived experience, that I'm going to work towards never forgetting that I'm worthy of loving myself just as every other person is.
So Massimo, how do you craft the book? How do you lay it out? What's that journey, the path that you take the reader down to deliver that kind of self-discipline, self-compassion, self-love, self-accountability? How do you structure it in such a way that you see them through that, they're beginning that journey?
So we've covered some of it already, but I think it starts with an acknowledgement that this is an opportunity and that it's a choice, and that somebody wants to choose to be kinder to themselves. They are fed up or tired or exhausted or burnt out by being overly self-critical, perfectionistic, defensive, controlling, whatever that coping mechanism might be, maybe people-pleasing. And there's this concept that I introduced that is called the well-intentioned, misinformed protectors. Well-intentioned, misinformed protectors, or WIMPs is the acronym. And we all have this part of our psychology, this coping mechanism that is well-intentioned, that is there to protect us. For me, perfectionism, defensiveness are those things. If I'm perfect and if I defend myself to make sure that I'm secure and my environment knows how important I am, then I'll be enough. It's misinformed because I do not need to do that. In fact, the things that most perfectionists try to control to be perfect are out of their control. The things that I was defending are undefensible.
Yeah.
And And so recognizing there's an assessment to identify what are each of our well-intentioned misinformed protectors. Another way to think about it is, what's your inner critic or your inner judge? It's there for a reason. It's trying to keep you safe.
Yeah.
Don't dream too big. Don't speak up too much. Don't do this. Don't do that. It's trying to protect us. It's trying to help us stay safe. But all of that is formed when we're children and at a time where we do not have all of our faculties.
Yeah.
And we do need protecting. And they served us well at a time. And for many people, they can serve them well up into adulthood in their professional lives. But anyone who aspires to be a great leader will hit a breaking point where being a perfectionist or overly controlling or a hard ass and having overly high standards will get in your way. And when that happens, then you have to be able to let that go. But I don't mean let it go and then it will ever go away, because it will always be there, because it's a part of us. So when people talk about like ego death, I don't believe in that. There's no ego death. It's a part of us.
Yeah.
What we need to do is change our relationship to it. So I am still defensive. I am still perfectionistic. These are still parts of who I am. But I have a relationship with that part of me now that when it comes up, I am at least able to address it. Whereas before the 360, before Hoffman, it was on autopilot. It was controlling me. I didn't know how to stop it because I didn't know where it was coming from. And so now when these things come up, I can meet it with self-compassion. And the book is a very practical and pragmatic approach to something that seems so soft and squishy. The number of times that I've said love in this conversation, John, would make a younger version of myself want to vomit.
Yeah.
Right? And there are probably people listening like, this guy is, this is too wooey, this is too soft. So you have to make it practical. You have to make it tangible and real so that you can actually see the results and the benefits of it.
So Massimo, what's the structure of the book? Do you break it out in sections, then chapters? What does that look like? Can you give us not every chapter title, but kind of a sense of the stages that you walk the reader through?
Yeah, I essentially introduce a framework for stepping into self-compassion. There's 6 parts to the framework, and within those 6, there's actually 3 polarities. And they all correspond with the research on self-compassion that's been done over the last 20 years under the great leadership of Dr. Kristen Neff. Her framework for self-compassion has 3 components. There's common humanity, which is recognizing that we all are sharing this human experience. We all suffer. We all feel disappointment. We all feel anger, sadness. That's just something that we signed up for. We're not alone, which is really helpful because oftentimes when we're in anxiety, stress, burnout, criticism, judgment, we feel very alone. We feel isolated. The second is around mindful awareness, which is just recognizing, what am I experiencing here in this moment? Could be, what are my thoughts? What are my assumptions? What's the story I'm telling myself? What are my feelings? What's my physical sensation? Somatically, what am I feeling? My heart's racing, my palms are sweating. And the third is self-kindness, which on the surface seems like it should be so simple, but when I work with my clients and introduce them to the notion of being kind to themselves, it makes people's skin crawl. Like, oh, I don't want to do that. But if you step back and you look at it, you don't want to be kind to yourself. It's kind of mind-blowing that you would think that that's something that we would all want, but it is so uncomfortable to do. And it's because it's not something that we have learned to do. It's not something that we have praised leaders for. We've praised leaders for hustle, grind, work hard, resilience, being smart, being tough. Nothing in there is about, oh, they were kind to themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just not in our lexicon. So the framework that I introduced, John, is called the Ward model. Ward meaning like towards, directional.
Yep.
And when it comes to common humanity, there is 2 directions, forward and backward. Forward is about what are our hopes and dreams. Forward for you would be, what is this thing that I'm looking for in the future that's this itch that I have? And acknowledging from a point of self-compassion that you are not alone in having some itch of wanting for more, looking for harmony. So be kind to yourself as you search for what that is. Common humanity. The backward piece is around everything that has happened to you that you've experienced in your life up to this point has helped shape who you are. And while you and I we live on different coasts of the country, we're different people, and we don't know each other well, I know there are things that you and I have experienced that are shared experiences. That if we spend a few minutes talking about our values, our hopes, our dreams, our families, that we would find commonality. We would find something that connects us. So again, stepping into that common humanity, that I'm not alone. That when I think about, oh, my life was so hard, I was dyslexic, school was so difficult, I'm not alone. There are many other people that have had similar experiences. How can I be of service to them? How can I connect with them if I'm feeling isolated? So that is the polarity of forward and backward, and it's connected to common humanity. The second is inward and outward, and this is connected to mindful awareness. So inward is like, what is my internal experience? Am I ruminating right now? Am I caught in a big assumption or a fear, a lie that I'm telling myself? Am I hijacked by an emotion? Am I so triggered that all of my walls are up? Am I being controlled by one of my well-intentioned, misinformed protectors? I'm being perfectionistic. I'm caught up in anxiety. And the outward piece is, what are my behaviors? How am I actually showing up? And this is where the gap between intention and impact come in. Because we can go into a situation, go into a meeting with an intention, but are we actually showing up in that way? Is the tone of my voice matching the words that I'm saying? Am I modeling curiosity, or am I feigning curiosity when I ask a question? Am I demonstrating that I really care and I want to know, or am I just going through the motions, right? Yeah. If I'm giving feedback to somebody, am I really telling them what I need to tell them, or am I hiding in some way and not saying what needs to be said? So it's about that self-awareness that we do both internally and externally. And then the third piece around self-kindness is windward and leeward. And windward is the windy side of an island. It's the side that the wind is coming from. This is self-kindness that takes courage. This is the self-kindness that requires us to have the difficult conversation. It requires us to ask for what we need. It requires us to do the thing that we don't want to do, but we know that it's an act of self-kindness. It could be taking a cold shower. It could be getting up early and getting fresh air first thing. It could be setting boundaries with when you end your workday. The things that they may be uncomfortable, they may be difficult, but you know that it is the right thing for you to do. That's windward. And leeward is the side of the island that doesn't have the wind, or the side of the shelter that we go to that is away from the storm. And those are the acts of self-kindness that are more tender and paternal and maternal in nature. Meaning, what is it that we can do to ourselves that are acts of kindness when we're under a great amount of pressure or stress? Could be a reminder that we're not alone. It could be journaling. It could be meditation. It could be going for a walk. Mm-hmm. It could be calling a friend. It could be telling somebody else that you love them and that you appreciate them. It could be a practice of gratitude and appreciation. And the book outlines these 6 avenues to practice self-compassion, with many, many different practices that people can choose. And it is truly a choose your own adventure. It's not prescriptive. What works for me won't work for somebody else. It may. And that's not the aim here, because it's not a one and done. This isn't a certification. You're not going to come to a weekend workshop and forever be changed. You're not going to come to the workshop and go, well, now I love myself today and forevermore. You're not going to read the book and have that. But what you will have is a guide, a manual, something to reference. If you choose every day to practice self-compassion, here is a way to go about doing that and find out what works best for you. And what I know is that self-kindness begets self-kindness. That when we have the epiphany of self-love as a leadership principle, from that day forward, we are ever changed because we don't ever want to live without that. Because the absence of self-love and self-kindness, John, is essentially looking for self-esteem. I'm looking outside myself for the world to tell me that I'm enough.
Yeah.
And while validation and recognition is great, getting a bonus or a pay increase or a promotion, those are all great things. But they're externally contingent, which fundamentally means they're not entirely in your control. And they're like eating Cheetos. When you have one, you just want another one, but after you finish the whole bag, there's no nourishment to them. There's no actual real substance to it. For anybody who's listening, or maybe you've experienced this, you get the promotion and it's not that long after that you just want the next promotion. Or you buy the new car and you thought that was going to be the be all end all, and within a few months you're like, yeah, this car's old. Yeah. Those are all external validators.
Yeah.
I'm not criticizing or vilifying them. They're great. But imagine getting those but not needing them because you're internally resourced, because you give yourself validation, respect, and love and esteem.
Massimo, I'm curious. Obviously, you have a history. This is how you've developed yourself, your experiences, the experiences you had with your clients. You're pouring all this into the book. Even though you go into the book thinking you're going to put something out, this is what it's going to be, and you're going to tweak it here and there. Is there anything that changed in you in the process of writing this book? Anything that was enhanced, anything that involved, anything that really stood out, any aha moments that you had as a result of writing this out and writing the book?
So many things have, I don't know if change would be the right word, but I learned a lot about myself through the process of writing the book. And one of them is, why do it in the first place? I had an internal struggle of, is this an ego need? Am I writing a book because I want attention, because I want external validation? Am I more monk-like and I'm writing this because I have a higher message and I'm just here as a messenger and it's just the universe? It's not that simple. It's something in between.
Yeah.
And realizing that has allowed me to accept what's out of my control, which has been very hard because the perfectionist in me was alive and well throughout writing this book. And along the way, I had to accept that it will never be perfect, that in my eyes, it will never be done, that the book that I would write today is probably different than the book that I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable. And to put something out in the world that is exposed to other people's judgment is uncomfortable. People may read it and think that it's garbage. They may hate it. People may read it and say that they love it. I have to let all that go. I've had to work very hard to be able to let all of that go. That was not easy. And I still have ambitions for what this book is, and I have the positive impact that I want it to have. But I have had to get to a place that no matter what happens, whether it becomes a bestseller or not a single person on earth reads it, that it doesn't make me any less of a person. That I'm not going to feel any different about the person that I am as a result. I don't know that even a few years ago I could have done that. To truly be able to surrender to something in that way, I feel like has been made possible because of my practice of self-compassion.
Massimo, just in wrapping up, one question I have is what book has inspired or made an impact on you? Is there one that stands out?
Yeah, there's a book that I recommend so often, and it's helped me through some really challenging times in my life, and it's called Transitions by William Bridges. And in simple terms, he talks about how we navigate life's transitions. That transition could be leaving a job, getting fired from a job, moving to a new place, going through a divorce, any big life transition we go through. And that typically, when we go through a transition, we leave one thing and we go to the next. And he says we're missing something, that there's a space in the middle that we need to create room for and occupy for a certain period of time. And he calls that the neutral zone. And in the neutral zone, it is a time for us to be abundantly curious, to explore what it is that we want to unpack from where we're leaving, what we want to leave behind, what we want to take with us, who we want to be going into this new future, whatever that might be. And every one of the clients that I've worked with over the years is going through some form of a transition. It could be a promotion, or it could be a restructure or a reorg in their business, or it could be something in their personal life. And recognizing that if we can occupy this space of neutrality and curiosity, that we can get a lot of work done there that's going to set us up for success in the next phase of our life. I talked about forgiveness before. Forgiveness is one of those things, because when we don't forgive, we harbor resentment, and that does metastasize, and it surfaces in anger, it surfaces in rumination, and it surfaces in bias, assumptions, and a fixed mindset about what the future will bring us, which limits our ability to see what's possible and to look at things from an abundant mindset as opposed to scarcity. It also doesn't allow us to let go of old stories that we've had from the past. My old story was, I'm dyslexic, I'm stupid, I'm unworthy. I don't believe that today. I don't believe that of anybody who is dyslexic. But I had to let that go. Otherwise, it would still be with me. I had to forgive myself for being so unkind to myself and believing that that was true when it's not.
Yeah. Massimo, what are you up to these days? Is there anything that you want to share that I didn't ask about, I didn't cover, anything at all? The floor is yours.
Human First, Leader Second comes out on September 10th. It's on pre-sale on Amazon right now. I am on a mission to spread the word of the leadership epiphany of self-love, and to educate as many people as possible who are interested about the practice of self-compassion in leadership. I believe that we are at the precipice of a pretty significant shift in organizations and leadership right now. The work that so many people have prided themselves on about how much they can get done is going to be occupied by AI in the not too distant future. Your value is not going to be based on how busy you are or how hard you work. It is going to be on the quality of the human that you are in the organization.
Yeah.
And in order to get that sorted out for yourself, you got to do the work. And I believe that it starts with learning to create these psychologically safe conditions for ourselves so that we can do the work, just as we as leaders are expected and want to do for our teams.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Massimo. I'm right behind you. I believe, that is our biggest strength, is our humanity. And I think most of us have to find it, because we've been programmed through life just to go through the motions, the script of life, like you said, college, career, family, whatever it may be, that we kind of, it's just too much of a tunnel vision scenario that's played out, where we have to really step back from that, love ourselves, be compassionate with ourselves. I think we've gone through life just looking at those markers and gauging our success based on where we fall in those markers. So this kind of conversation, your kind of book, is always a great reminder. I look forward to reading it, just because I'm, the pandemic called that out, that leaders really need to reach into their human side to understand themselves first, because it has to be authentic. It can't just be a checkbox. But in order to understand others, you really do have to understand yourself. And it's cliche, I know, but there's always something that happens in society. It may have been the pandemic that kicked it up this time to really understand who we are so that we can serve others even better than we have been. So I appreciate your time. And again, Massimo's book is Human First, Leader Second, How Self-Compassion Outperforms Self-Criticism. Massimo, thank you so much for this conversation.
John, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
It's awesome. If there's anything I might have missed, we're limited on time. There's so much to cover. I go down some tangents. If there's something that you're curious about, please reach out. Let me know. I'll reach out to Massimo, see what kind of insights, guidance, knowledge, anything that I can get back from him, just to kind of keep that conversation going. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.